at the Castro Theater.
Hi, Connor here from BCM. So excited to be here. First night, opening night. We're having a great time.
Hi, Debora here from Berkeley Community Media. It's the 65th Annual Film Festival, and it's my first time here. I'm excited.
Woohoo! I'm Melanie, and I'm here with an amazing team of interns and Kana, and feeling the rainbow of love at the film festival. Looking forward to lots of fabulous films and interviews.
Hey, it's Sophia from BCM. Glad to be here. Having a fun time interviewing different people, meeting a lot of new faces. Glad to be here.
I've gone every year since I moved here, I think, for the last 6 years. I have been working in documentary film on and off, and I really like supporting local Bay Area film. I also am really just excited to be back at the Castro Theater because it's been a long time.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really excited about Christy Metz. I do a lot of body positivity work, and she's a really important actress in that world, and it's been really important for a lot of people. I'm really excited about, there's a film called Mija that's playing next Thursday. I don't know a lot about it, but it's got like a plus-size Latinx character, and I'm really excited about that. And then I think we're gonna go see, there's one, it's got the word light in the title, and it's about someone who was incarcerated and became an artist, came into like his artist identity during incarceration, and we're gonna go see that. And I'm trying to think of like what else. There's like a Bolivian film that we're gonna see that's kind of a metaphor about land and environmental impact, and so those are the ones I can think of off the top of my head. Yeah.
Well, what I would say is we're the oldest film festival in the world. So the whole
In the world?
No, sorry, in the Americas. So the idea that sort of entrepreneurial spirit that the Bay Area is, there was this wonderful man named Rubin who had this idea that why don't we do this? We want to bring films from around the world and bring them here to audiences. And this was in 1957 at a time when you aren't watching things on DVD or streaming, and access to films wasn't there, especially international films. So, to me, the legacy of the idea of bringing films from around the world to share here in the Bay Area is what makes this festival special.
So can you tell us a little bit about your background and what drew you into the story?
Sure. Well, I've been a social issue documentary filmmaker for 25 years or so, basically since college. And I've made a lot of films about communities that aren't my own. I always sort of liked to use the video camera and documentary film as a tool to investigate and learn about other people's experiences. I never really was interested in making a film about my own experience. But, when I had a daughter, which was 7 years ago, I definitely became aware of things that I just didn't know about gender and parenting. It definitely felt like, as someone who's always been more what you'd call non-binary or gender non-conforming, definitely felt like I was suddenly kind of accepted into this exclusive club of women that I didn't even know existed. I'd get these sort of like approving nods when I had my pregnant belly. So I just sort of noticed that there was something going on around gender and parenting that was very, just very, very palpable. And then people would often ask me, why did you decide to become the one that was pregnant? Because I was definitely more masculine than my partner at the time. So I just noticed that there were so many kind of judgments there and ideas about who might even just want to get pregnant. So that idea kind of simmered. And then when my daughter was 2, I was carrying her across this room, actually, this living room where I'm sitting now. And she sort of laughed and said, "Ha, Mama has a mustache." And I thought, oh, that is such a great idea for a movie. That name for a movie, that title for a movie is so good that I have to make a movie just so that there can be a film out in the world with that title on it.
Do you think the kids, if they did see the film, did they feel represented by the film? Do you think that they felt portrayed accurately?
The kids love the film, yeah. I mean, they're young, so when they watched it, they sort of laughed and they were tickled to see themselves being portrayed as fairies or unicorns or whatever. They didn't say that much. I mean, they were 5 and 6 year olds mainly. So they just sort of laughed and said, I like it. They didn't there wasn't a ton of reflection, but I have to imagine that they took home, really took in a new way the messages that are in the film. I know my daughter has.
So cute. Yeah, I like the way the scissors come up and they're cutting through, and the way you have the format of it. It's kind of continually changing, but there's like these, the different media that maybe you can speak to how your process was of actually putting the film together.
Yeah. I mean, I do think that in some ways necessity is the mother of invention. That saying really, really holds true. And certainly here, in the case of my film, I do think that it wouldn't have been all animated. I don't think it would have been as good if it weren't for the pandemic and quarantine. I think the film was better without going out and having live action footage in there.
I know for us, it certainly stirred a great conversation about, like everything from fashion. We were talking about that, about what's expected of you in terms of Sophia wants to continue her work into the fashion field. So it came up for
just talking a lot about how clothes are labeled and pant sizes, they do it based on women's sizing, with shoes too. It reminded me of bathrooms, and I was just wondering, it brought me into thinking about colors and how colors are associated, with specific, and how that came to be. And then Melanie was telling us how blue used to be associated with girls, and pink.
Oh yeah, that was Audrey was saying blue used to be associated with girls.
So arbitrary, it just shows you how arbitrary it is.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The fact that blue used to be the girls' color and pink was the boys' color. Yeah. Just somewhere it changed and someone decided it was going to be the other way. Mm-hmm. Not to mention, what's the non-binary color? Right. Everything is such a binary. I also think too, and I'm wondering if you guys feel this as young people, but I think people are understanding more and more that gender identity really is a moving target. It changes every single day, sometimes multiple times a day. It used to be, I think growing up, we all had this idea that you would sort of find your gender or your gender expression and then stick with it, and that was that was you. I always knew that we've kind of imposed these boxes and constructs on kids, and by the time they're in maybe 3rd or 4th grade, they're pretty set there. But to really see with these really little kids, these kindergartners and 1st graders, how outside those boxes are, that was definitely enlightening for me, and just kind of reinforced what I thought already.
It's always been just a way to reflect all of the little things that, yes, I do need to do that. All of the weird things that happen in our day-to-day lives, and it's a way to make it more theatrical and more apparent to people, a way for them to experience it kind of through your own eyes and your own world. It also has always been a place where I found community, because to make a film you need a lot of people. So you meet a lot of people, which is always fun, and you get to hear their inspirations and their art.
I think they're essential.
Yeah, it's the creative force of art making. I think without it, film have expanded creative conditions. So,
and I think supporting it. Yeah, I think we both really believe in the power of storytelling.
I guess I like a lot of different things. I think as someone who's interested in making films myself, it's fun seeing more indie stuff that is lower budget. It's amazing to see what's possible when you don't have all of the resources.
Yeah, I mean, I think initially my first thought is representation. It matters so much. Not just actually it's kind of nerdy, but so what representation matters in a few different ways, not only for self-esteem, but when the brain sees more of a certain image, it stamps that image as normal. And so that's why representation matters, not just for the confidence stuff, but just cognitively, it really matters. The other thing I'm thinking of is sort of like, I think film is something that has itself a lot. It's an industry that has a lot of influence, and so I think it's like really, really powerful when you see film, and especially these. Like, it's hard to break into Hollywood, and I love independent film festivals. Highlight a lot of artists who aren't telling stories in traditional ways.
I definitely think that documentary filmmaking, social issue documentary filmmaking is just such an amazing opportunity and, a really incredible gift actually, and a blessing to get to, help connect audiences and viewers with other people's life experiences. Maybe get to change the way people think about something, at least. If not to sway them one way or another, at least to have people have a deeper understanding of other people's experiences, especially people who aren't like them. We all know that social change is rooted in exposure and learning and education and experiencing other people's lives. And a large part of the way that can happen is through social issue documentary film.
Yeah, I think it's so important to have this like on a local level, but the fact that they're like bringing in talent from all over, there's a lot of international films here too. Like for the Bay Area, like we want to keep it being a center of film, and it's getting harder and harder in some ways, I think, because there's fewer funders, and it's hard to get started. So I feel like places like this, you can meet people, and it's just a really important platform.
So to me, what independent film is, distinctive voices, a perspective that is not diluted, I guess, in a way, by the forces that may be making something at a very large scale. And that's what excites me the most, which is what is the voice behind the work and what is that voice trying to say?
I feel like the importance of independent filmmaking is definitely giving voice to unheard voices, essentially.
Yeah.
It's like all about being heard and really like hearing from like the community, like what that representation, not even just representation, because it's bigger than that, right? Mm-hmm. It's just really about like really owning your voice and really being able to like give a story that like, that just isn't common in the mainstream media. It's really about kind of like defying those Hollywood barriers and really just being true to you, and also like being able to convey that reality and representing that in like a myriad of ways that I feel like Hollywood is very limited.
We're here with the director of Black Mothers Love and Resist. Can you talk about a little bit of your background and what drew you into this story?
Yeah, sure. My background is in broadcast journalism. I'm originally from Brazil. I moved to the Bay Area in 2009, and that was the year that Oscar Grant's story was all over the news.
Right.
And coming from Brazil, I knew the problem of police brutality, and I know that it crosses borders and cultures. So when I came here and I came across the story of Oscar Grant, that impacted me a lot. Several years later, I was working as a video journalist at a newsroom in the Bay Area, and we had a video series called The Aftermath, and we did episodes on different stories that took place, and they were big in the news, and then we would investigate the aftermath of that sad story. And at the time, it was 2017, I decided to do an aftermath about Oscar Grant's case because I wanted to know how his family was doing and everything. So I called his mom, Wanda Johnson, or Reverend Wanda Johnson, and she told me that she was organizing a gathering of mothers who lost children to police brutality, and she was inviting moms from all around the country, and that was an annual event that she put together, and she invited me to come and film. So when I went there and I got to meet her and her network of moms, and I just saw them strategizing, comforting one another, and really helping each other. So I thought this should be a bigger story. One of the reasons why I wanted to do this story is because I know, as a journalist, I know that there is a gap in reporting that tells like the everyday challenge, that exposes the everyday challenge that families that are victims of police, are victimized by police brutality. It destroys a whole family, it destroys a whole community. And I think as a journalist, I never saw that there is good coverage about their everyday challenge. So I felt like I should follow those families closely, and I did for 5 years. So I thought it was very important. But my film not only holds space for that, you know, the pain and the trauma that the family face, but I wanted to acknowledge the work of the mothers, right? Because I feel like Black women are often left out of history. We are benefiting from the work that these mothers are doing. They are passing legislation. They are lobbying for legislation reform. They are, you know, lobbying for many things that our society is benefiting. And I felt like my film had to kind of acknowledge and celebrate their victories, right? In terms of the Bay Area being, for me, I moved from Brazil and I made the Bay Area my second home. And it's just incredible for me, like when I was doing research for this film, and I was kind of going back in history, and I'm like, oh, you know, the Black Panthers from here, you know, they started here. It's a movement that started in response to police brutality. And I knew of them when I was in Brazil, but I'm like now living here, right? So I'm like, I live in a place that is the birthplace for many very important movements, like the Black Lives Matter. Alicia Garza, one of the co-founders, she's from Oakland. And so it's just incredible, like for me as a journalist, I don't even need to go elsewhere because we have so many like rich stories right in our backyard. So I think that's very amazing. Yes, I think so. There are a couple goals. Like I do want people to realize that, you know, when a child is killed by police, you don't just lose that child. The whole family is devastated, right? A whole community. Wanda Johnson, Reverend Wanda Johnson, the mom of Oscar Grant, talks about like how his friends are still traumatized. The friends who were there when Oscar Grant was killed in front of them. So it devastates the whole community. So I want people to understand their pain and see that so we can address that problem. But I also want people to understand their work, the work they are putting to it, and value their work, and celebrate the work that the moms are doing, right? We have some moms running for office, you know, which they should be, because, you know, they are right in the front lines and they know what they are doing. We have moms lobbying for legislation. I don't want to give up too much on about my film, but you see how Wanda is fighting, and then she, you know, she gets some things changed that need to be changed. So I want people to recognize that, you know, and celebrate that. But I also want, I think the organizing and the resources that the moms are sharing in my film is transferable, for that knowledge is transferable for other communities that are facing any type of oppression, right? It's not just police brutality. There is so many type of oppression with immigrants, with women. And so I think I want the film to serve as a model of inspiration for other communities across the country to fight white supremacy and other oppressive systems.
In terms of this film, what's motivated me was sort of in the midst of racial upheaval, which we've seen in the past 2 years or so, we actually offer some solutions that have worked in the past. And that's really what motivates me, what I'm most proud of about this film, is it shows what has worked and what still can work. And it really was. It was like a sort of perfect storm, if you will. A lot of things came together. A renegade defense team, and a female co-counsel, which was kind of unheard of at the time. A lenient judge who allowed the defense team to bring racism itself into the trial. That itself was unheard of, and still to this day would be unheard of. And then the jury itself, which was the first really diversified jury in a major murder trial in America. The first time. Majority women, 4 minorities, and the black jury foreman. That had never happened.
So part of why this film is so important, related to progressive movements, is this is a lost history, or an untold history and an unknown history. And part of what the film talks about is the important role of having people outside a courtroom influencing some kind of consciousness inside the courtroom. So on the one hand, you have this very heavy first, degree murder trial going on, and on the other hand, you have all these people who say, we are watching what goes on in this courtroom, and it needs to be fair in terms of the jury, it needs to be fair in terms of the judge, and we're looking out for Huey Newton and whether he's getting justice. So there was a direct link in this case. That is a story people do not know. And so the next time somebody gets arrested and is on trial for first-degree murder, or someone just gets exonerated, you want people to understand the power of a movement in relationship to that. And that has been true in every criminal trial, in America since at least I've been alive. So there is always a really important connection. And when you educate the next generation of sort of students and young people to see how power works, it empowers them.
Hi, it's Debora here, and today I have Ms. A.K. Sandhu.
Hey Jabril, thank you for having me.
Thank you. So tell me a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I came to filmmaking from a very different background. I went to UC Berkeley, so this is hometown for me. And I studied finance. Immigrant parents aren't always big on art school, so worked in finance. The 2008 market crash kind of allowed me an exit, and photography kind of ended up being my profession after that. Traveled internationally, did some shoots, eventually got into filmmaking, and a few years ago decided to use those skills to tell real stories through documentaries.
Do you feel like film has shaped the person you are today, and how so?
Oh man, that's deep. We're just gonna dive right in,
Yeah.
Okay. It's interesting. Telling stories with photography kind of opened my eyes to how the camera could sort of let me travel the world and meet people and connect with them in a whole different way. So that in itself was pretty amazing to realize. And then when I transitioned to film, I initially shot a friend's wedding as a wedding gift, and that turned me into this international wedding filmmaker for a bit, which was a lot of fun. And while I was shooting this big wedding in India, I worked with an amazing filmmaker who had worked in Bollywood, like industry experience, but he was shooting with the same camera as me. And I'm like, with the 5D, you could do that, and he made the most beautiful documentary style film. So then it's like, the power of one still image is still amazing, but then when you add sound and music and everything else, it just takes it to the next level. So when I discovered that and started wanting to tell real important stories, love stories are very important to me, so the word love finds a way in a lot of my titles. But the past couple of years is where the realization truly happened of how filmmaking is really sort of pushing me to dig deep and really make sense of this crazy world. So during the pandemic is when I started therapy for the first time, and I realized, wow, this whole creative journey has been therapeutic in itself, and connecting that and then realizing how much the work I do now is more intentional and creatively therapeutic has been a positive externality of this pandemic, and realizing that. So it allows me to move forward a lot more intentionally in my journey as a filmmaker.
That's cool. My parents always tell me that you should enjoy the work you do, because then the work won't be good, or
Yeah,
so
yeah,
it sounds
truly.
like you really found that happy place.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough place because there's not always happy, but there are moments like this. It's like when people actually see the film and audiences get to see it, you're like, wow, I am doing this for the right reasons, because the creative process is up and down. You don't get a regular paycheck, which can make life very stressful, especially if you live in an expensive place like we do here in the Bay. So there are times it's not the happiest moments, but those moments are really important to really reflect on why we do what we do.
So what was the inspiration behind it, and why do you think this is an important story to tell?
Sometimes the universe sends you signs, and this was definitely one of those times where I ended up taking a finance job I didn't really want to take, but I needed the money, and the only reason I felt like I got that job is because I made one friend in the lunchroom who happened to ask me one day, oh, what are you doing this weekend? I'm like, I'm in this film fellowship. I have to look for a local Oakland character to feature. And she mentioned Dana King, and I'm like, that name sounds super familiar. I was growing up in the Bay, she was a broadcaster. And she goes, she switched careers at 50 and became an artist. And I had switched careers from finance to film. And I'm like, oh, that'll be amazing. So I connected with Dana, and being a broadcaster, she was very comfortable with the camera. She had a great story, she was amazing. And I said, all right, well, we'll tell the story about your life and your art and a woman, shifting careers. And then the pandemic hit, and shoot got delayed, but then the monuments all around the country were coming down. And she's like, guess what commission I just got? And I was like, oh my God, this is a divine intervention. This is the story we need to tell. So now there wasn't just one amazing Black woman doing something great. There was Frederica Newton, the widow of Huey Newton, doing something amazing. And that combination was just a godsend. So I just followed the signs of the universe and was like, I have to tell this story.
How important is representation in film?
My subjects talk about this briefly in the film as well, and how important representation is. Dana's work, creating Black bodies in bronze, is all about representation. And as an Asian immigrant minority filmmaker, for me, there's one woman who made Bend It Like Beckham who's from my community, right? And to see what these women can do and to tell these stories, and our perspective is just a unique way to look at it. I mean, my family's Sikh, and I remember when I first learned about the Black Panthers as a child, I was like, oh, the Panthers are like the Sikhs of Black people. Like, armed resistance, self-defense is a principle of the Sikh faith, right? It's a basic tenet. So to me, that made perfect sense, even though some people, even here in the States, Black folks are like, oh, I don't know about the weapons or the militancy. And it's like, how else do we defend ourselves?
Exactly.
So I always had this sort of interesting connection to the story. And when it came to representation, I mean, to be able to tell our stories, to create cross-cultural solidarity in the process is hugely important. Minorities sticking together or understanding that we're continuously pit against each other in new ways. It's the same old model that gets renewed over and over. I mean, I see that now in film. Like, I've been working on this film and trying to make a bigger story, and white producers coming in and being like, all right, let's drop her and get somebody more famous. I mean, you see that everywhere, over and over, right? So and I'm very grateful for the film fellowship that we had, because the whole entire purpose of Jennifer Crystal Chin, who developed that program, is to help BIPOC filmmakers tell stories from our communities, because we really need to be able to tell that in unique ways and create, like I said, cross-cultural solidarity in the process.
You're the executive director for SF Film?
Correct.
So, what does that entail?
Oh my goodness. Okay, that's wearing lots of different hats.
Okay.
My background, and I think every organization does it differently. My background is in film development and film production. So my background is not from nonprofit, but I did spend time working in nonprofit film prior to coming here, and that was my first exposure to understanding how nonprofit and film interact as an art form. So what do? I kind of do, here's how I sort of think about it. It's not very different than being like a producer of a film. Like, your job is to get everyone onto the airplane, to get the airplane up to cruising altitude and keep it steady so that everybody who's on board, who has their different things to do, has the space and the ability to do that. And if we do our work well, we can try to keep everything very steady. Like, a lot of what I do is thinking strategically and creatively. What's the vision? What do we want the organization to accomplish? So your question about maybe who we are now is like, what is the future of what the organization should do? What is our mission? What is our impact that we want to have in terms of welcoming different voices, welcoming and growing sort of a next generation of storytellers?
Berkeley Art Museum and Pacific Film Archive is one of the oldest and largest film archives on the West Coast. We have over 18,000 films in our collection, many of which we screen throughout the year on the screen in our Barbaro Osher Theater, which is a 226-seat theater that shows movies 5 nights a week. In addition to screening films, we also care for and collect old films and classic titles, including a lot of video works and experimental works, many of which are from right here in the Bay Area. And we care for and restore these films and bring them back to life for audiences today so that they can be enjoyed for generations to come. Film is a really important part of this institution. It's half of what we do here at the museum, and we're really proud to partner with local filmmakers and local film organizations to cultivate a thriving film culture here in the Bay Area. BAMPFA partners with filmmakers and film organizations across the Bay Area all throughout the year. One of the biggest ways that we do that is working with local film festivals, particularly film festivals in San Francisco that are looking for an East Bay venue so they can broaden their audiences. We're really excited to be the exclusive East Bay venue for SF Film. We're also the exclusive East Bay venue for the Mill Valley Film Festival, and that's an exciting time for us because we show a lot of contemporary films in those programs, whereas most of the year we focus primarily on repertory cinema. Just recently, the SF Film program brought a lot of new audiences and a lot of newer films into our space, which was very exciting. And many of those films came with the filmmakers themselves, who were there to present and do Q&As. We awarded a couple of awards here during the festival. So just a really kind of exciting and vital time to see a lot of film fans from San Francisco and from the East Bay and beyond come into our theater and enjoy a really great period of cinema. You know, I think BAMPFA is really a cornerstone of film culture in the Bay Area, and that's something that we're really proud of and something that we take very seriously. It's part of our job as the leading film archive on the West Coast to cultivate a thriving film culture for today's audiences. And we do that by showing older films and newer films, but by bringing the resources of the university campus that we're a part of our top-notch curatorial team, and of all of the thriving creative energy here in Berkeley and across the Bay Area to really engage our audiences and make these films and these events relevant to current visitors. UC Berkeley is our home, and we're really proud to be part of this campus and part of this thriving academic community. And it enables us to do things that very few other film centers or art centers are able to do. So there are plenty of organizations in the Bay Area, in Los Angeles, in New York, and elsewhere that show the kinds of movies that we show, but it's very unusual for most of those organizations to have access to the breadth of scholarship, to the vast academic resources, to the thriving student community, and in general just the kind of like intellectual vitality of the UC Berkeley campus that really enables us to do challenging or interesting and experimental programming, you know, that might not always reach an audience if it was shown in a place that didn't have that kind of intellectual vibrancy. So we're really happy and proud of that connection, and I think it strengthens BAMPFA, not just for those of our audiences who are on campus, but people around the Bay Area and beyond who benefit from being part of a film culture that's really plugged in to America's top public research university and really adds a great deal of vitality to what we do inside these walls.
But yeah, no, I mean, I do think, yeah, kind of like what Echo was saying, like, you know, like, it is kind of like a literal, like, collage of different people and cultures that are here, and it's forming, you know, something that's very unique in the Bay. I think that's one place, places I have traveled and been, you know, the Bay is unique in that regards where, you know, the Bay definitely is like pushing the envelope and pushing things forward in a lot of ways that we don't get a lot of credit for, you know, in the real, but at the same time, that stuff still permeates out into the other parts of the world and other parts of the land as well. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. We have one last question we ask all our filmmakers, because we also work with young people and interns, and our, you know, sort of what we do is allow access to media equipment and training for folks in our community. So what would you say, or what advice would you give to a young person or first-time filmmaker as they're trying to break into the industry or get their first film out there?
Yeah, no, I think, and I would say what worked for me, right? Because when I moved from Brazil, A, I was not a documentary filmmaker, B, I didn't know anyone, right? So what I would do, I would just go, like, we have this amazing film festival happening here, and they have the best films ever, you know. So attend film festivals, stay for the Q&A, because that's when filmmakers talk about their process of making their film. Go there and connect with them right after, right? Because most of the screenings, they bring filmmakers, right? So those are the best connections that you can make. A lot of things that I took advantage of too, you know, before I was a resident at SF Film in 2019, I would just go, like, they have like mixers where they bring people around, the filmmakers, and you can make connections. That's where I made my, like, friends, you know, and that I'm still in touch with today. So I think, you know, just take advantage of all the free events that there are out there. In terms of like getting access to equipment, you know, when I left the J school, I attended the J school at UC Berkeley, and when I left, I didn't have any gear, but I had a camera, an okay camera, and instead of waiting until I had like the best gear ever, I was just like, let me shoot what I can with the camera that I have, right? And I was able to do a couple segments for the web, and that helped me to get to the next opportunity and the next one. So I think, yeah, never think that, you know, we don't have the perfect gear. The best gear is what you have in front of you.
Well, for anyone who's watching who's an aspiring filmmaker or an aspiring film academic or any kind of film professional that you might want to be, a great place to start at BAMPFA would be to visit our Film Library and Study Center, which is on the basement floor here and holds one of the largest collections of film research material and ephemera anywhere in this region. It's a great opportunity for, you know, anyone from serious film scholars to just local enthusiasts to learn about film and discover all of the exciting materials that we have in our archives. A great opportunity, I think, especially for students to do research on historical film stuff here. And something that I think a lot of people don't necessarily know that we have. You know, film lovers come for our movies and really enjoy all of the programs that we put on in our theater, but they forget that we're part of this larger academic institution that has just a tremendous amount of resources for anyone who wants to learn about film and get more involved in that world. And that's something that we continue to do and will be doing more of in the years ahead. So film is really alive here at BAMPFA, and anyone who wants to get into film should take advantage of those resources to discover it.
Get in touch with the drive that you have inside of you, because it's the only thing that can keep you going when the going gets tough.
Right. That one of the great things right now is it's very inexpensive to go off and shoot something. You've got your phone, you've got a small camera, you can go and you can do it. The most important thing, I think, is try to create work that's very truthful to what your voice is, to what you want to explore. Trying to create something just for sake of getting attention is very appealing, and I understand, but that, I think what people get excited about is what is your voice. So staying true to yourself and just create work. Yeah.
I definitely think the biggest thing is just stick with it. You know, it can take a decade, 2 decades sometimes to launch a career. I think people expect and think that a career will be sort of handed to them on a silver platter, or if they dot all their I's and cross their T's, that it's just going to be there. And it just can take a really, really, really long time. But if you know what you love and you want to do it, when things get hard, just stick with it. Eventually you'll get a break and things will begin to fall into place.
Everyone will say be passionate and keep doing it and never give up. I would say also be practical and find ways to sustain yourself, because it's not fair on you and your family that you have to struggle sometimes. I mean, unless you have a trust fund, you've got to have a stable job so you can stay sane and use this as a creative outlet and make it exactly how you want to make it. So the financial pressures can be huge as a filmmaker. I mean, I felt them even though I had a career in finance before, which a lot of filmmakers don't have. So as hard as it is, try to find that balance of sustainable income while you're creating your passion work. And then hopefully there will come a time when the passion work will do everything. So it's like the 80-10-10 rule, they say. 80% of your work initially will be your bread and butter, and you get to invest 10% or 20% in your passion work. And over time that'll change. So 20% of your time will be your income, and 80% of your time you can spend doing passion work. So you got to know how to transition that journey and plan accordingly. It's tough, but we can make it happen. Just be practical as well. But stay with the passion work. Don't give up on that.